Hey, this is Chad with Drawn and Cornered. It is November 29th, 2021, and here's the news you need for the day. First off, I want to lead with this just because it was extraordinarily important news that was released right before the holiday weekend. I guess it was Friday, something like that. It's the verdict in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Now, we were watching the Rittenhouse case pretty closely. The Arbery case was kind of just a little bit behind, but was running concurrently. And the Arbery case finally came to its conclusion with guilty verdicts across the board for the three gentlemen, obviously ranging from pretty severe on down. The actual shooter, McMichael, got the biggest guilties across all of them, and the other two kind of subsequently further down. But guilty verdicts, that's the important thing. But this is what I think is even more important about that story. The expectation after watching the video was that this seemingly was the right way to go. The problem is that news media is still sort of following a narrative that isn't accurate. The news media is still talking about Arbery out jogging and essentially posing no threat, making this sound a lot more one-sided than it was. And this case had some complexity to it. This case had some room to move in there, but in order to make it a racial case, in order to make it a case about the U.S. system broadly, there were facts about Arbery that needed to be put down. There were facts about surrounding the McMichael's circumstance that had to be put down. And you saw broadly from the mainstream media that this is what was being done. There were routine, not break-ins, but casings of joints by Black men in the months prior to Ahmaud Arbery actually being killed. And the defense was posing that Ahmaud Arbery was this individual that was moving in and out of construction sites and where things were missing at times, essentially saying that Ahmaud Arbery was the one who was stealing these items. On that day, Ahmaud Arbery was going through a construction site and seemingly just kind of walking around and perusing. Now, in and of itself, that is a trespass. It's a misdemeanor, no big deal. But if you're stealing something, that's a felony. And as a felony, citizen's arrest is available to you. Now, the specifics around Georgia's law and what constitutes and what needs to be present in order to facilitate a citizen's arrest is still open, I guess, a little bit for discussion, whether or not you have to see the crime, whether you have to be aware of the crime. An officer had talked to the McMichael clan in previous weeks about the fact that there was a robber in the area that was casing joints, and he kind of wanted everybody to keep an eye out for that. So the McMichaels could have very easily thought they were doing the right thing in trying to catch somebody they thought was a criminal. Now, this doesn't mean that they had the right to do what they did, but the notion that somehow there wasn't cause, or at least a reasonable possibility that they could be out there just doing what they thought was right, and not necessarily in a racial sense, is completely there. The media was not telling you that. The media was not offering all of these different opportunities for this to be a reasonable case. And the reason why is because they wanted to make this about race. And the crazy thing is that this case, even the prosecution's case, never made this about race. It was not entered in. It was not talked about. There was no notion that the McMichaels were acting out of racial animus when they did this, when they committed this act. This actually came down to what qualifies as a self-defense claim and what qualifies as a citizen's arrest claim in Georgia under this law, based on what Ahmaud Arbery was doing, purportedly was doing prior to that, in the months prior to that, and what the McMichaels knew and what their intent was when they were going through this. This doesn't negate what they actually did in facilitating that, and the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, and how they probably went too far and were a little overzealous about the manner by which they were trying to conduct this citizen's arrest. But the media wanted this so badly to be about race and to be about the U.S. system when it comes to race, that those facts kind of had to be swept under the rug. And you can tell this even today when people are talking about, and this is in the New York Times, Washington Post had articles like this, talking about how Ahmaud Arbery's case is not the justice system working. This is not anything more than just getting this case right. There's still a long way to go. Joe Biden himself said there's a lot that still needs to be done for racial justice in this country. And that is the thing that I think is very important, is that this has to be about race for the left in order to push this even further. And even though this case was correct, they will say that the fact that Ahmaud Arbery was killed at all, and that there are deaths by black men out there at the hands of white men, presumably, that is recognition that America is still unjust and still racist, even though you will find that whites are killed by blacks. This is not the majority in either of those cases. Generally, blacks are killed by blacks, whites are killed by whites. But the notion that somehow this has to be a racial case and there has to be a further wedge driven in the racial divide, and how this is a systemic issue is just so blatantly obvious in the fact that the narrative is carried through, even though elements of the story initially were against that narrative. And the fact that they got guilty verdicts in Georgia also runs against that narrative. It's just, you will see this used as a pawn even after everything goes the right way. And we do, in fact, get justice for Ahmaud Arbery. Second story that you're going to want to find out about today is there's a new variant. It's coming out of South Africa. It is around the world. It's already in North America and Canada. This is the Omicron variant. You will see that Fauci has come forward and said it's essentially inevitable that it will come to the States. They talk about whether or not the vaccines are going to be able to deal with Omicron, or if there will have to be further boosters for this. I'm not saying that this is made up. It is not made up. It's not faked in any way, but it is extraordinarily timely for the Democrats in their position when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to masking, when it comes to lockdowns, when it comes to control. People seemed to be getting over the idea of COVID as something we had to beat, and it was just something we were going to learn to live with. Now, with this new variant, it will be a couple of weeks before Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson know whether or not their vaccines are effective against it. But we will be moving into another situation where we'll be talking about cases and deaths and all of this over again for something that essentially is going to be a long-term issue for us. The folks out there that are already terrified of even Delta and initial COVID, this is only going to throw them further in. We've had now bans of travel from certain countries and to certain countries. All of that's coming back down. It's dropping in again. The funny thing is that the same folks that hammered Trump for his travel bans are now putting through those same travel bans to try and stop the spread of Omicron. We will see how this goes in the next couple of weeks, but be prepared for COVID to fire up again, the hysterics to fire up again, for everything to become COVID-centric, just when we thought we were sort of edging out of that consistent problem. That's everything I have for you today. If you have any further questions, comments, critiques, want to tell me I'm crazy, definitely leave that down below. If you like this type of thing with a little bit of news, a little bit of analysis every morning for you, definitely subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell so you get notifications every time we release a new video, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I will see you on the weekends if anything big breaks. But again, this is Chad with Drawn and Cornered. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow.